Hey, it's State of State. We got your Nittany Lion update. It's a football discussion with Tom and Justin, so kick back and press play.
With former Penn State and NFL defensive back Justin King, I'm Tom Hannafin. This is State of State. Please like, comment, subscribe, rate us, and turn on notifications. Follow us on social media at State of State Pod. Comment on our YouTube channel. And if you haven't done so already, you can become a member of our YouTube channel. For just 99 cents a month, you can get all upcoming episodes of State of State, plus our entire members-only playlist, ad-free, commercial-free. Hit the join button on our homepage or follow the link in the description of this podcast. State of State is presented by BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, BetOnline provides you with constant, real-time odds and action and the ability to watch the games as they happen. With the largest selection of odds on everything, football, the NBA, college basketball, the NHL, the UFC, and boxing. Head to betonline.ag today to get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. State of State is presented by BetOnline. The game starts here. State of State is proud to partner with Illumination Brewing for another season of crafting State IPA, the perfect tailgate and game day beer for Penn State football fans. State IPA is available now, but it won't last much longer. Check in with your local beer distributor, grocery store, plus select bars and restaurants. Visit illuminationbrewing.com/beer/state-IPA to learn more. Must be 21 years or older to purchase. Please drink responsibly. Also, State of State is a proud supporter of Blue White Outfitters. Blue White Outfitters was created as a retail shop meant to highlight the confidence, competitiveness, and fearlessness of the elite athletes found throughout the history of Penn State University. Check out their Lockdown U and Lawn Boys merchandise today. All sales from Blue White Outfitters directly benefit Penn State student athletes. Also, official State of State merchandise is available now. Support the show and grab State of State t-shirts, hoodies, hats, and more. Visit www.bluewhiteoutfitters.com today. Number 4 Penn State beats Maryland by a score of 44-7, and through chaos during rivalry weekend, the Penn State Nittany Lions are going to the Big Ten championship game. They will meet the Oregon Ducks next Saturday at 8 p.m. Eastern on CBS in Indianapolis. Listen, I fouled this up on our last episode and that I thought there were a couple other elements that had to happen. All that really had to happen was Michigan had to pull off a mega upset of Ohio State. And shockingly, that actually happened. So that was pretty stunning. We're going to get to that, but we have to talk about what Penn State did on the field today against Maryland. This was as thorough of a beatdown as you could possibly lay on an opponent. This was something I was personally hoping to see Penn State do against the likes of Minnesota on the road, but I will leave that there. This game against Maryland was everything you wanted it to be. It reminded me very much of the Illinois game earlier on in the year. The score was a lot more inflated. This is obviously a worse team than that Illinois team. But other than the early drive there by Morris to Prather getting the touchdown and the fumble out the gates, a little bit of a shaky start. This was the best defensive performance I have seen Penn State put on tape this season. I think it was something like 6 sacks, 3 interceptions, 6 tackles for loss, and they held Maryland to 194 total yards of offense. At halftime, they had held Maryland to 97 total yards. They had 2 picks, 3 sacks, and 3 tackles for loss alone. Like, it was just utter dominance the entire game from the defense, and the offense found its rhythm, obviously. What did you think from a macro perspective about this game?
I think it was a great win, especially to think about going into the Big Ten championship and the way that they played, hitting on all cylinders, a lot more rhythmic of a game on the offensive side, execution in the red zone. Tyler Warren, I guess he's worth the price of admission for the games. I mean, Drew looked good, throwing some nice balls down the field. And like you said, just to echo about the defense, they were swarming, creating turnovers, and just, I mean, it seemed like there were 12 or 13 guys out there, just the way that they were playing and just the speed, good angles. And, Coach Allen's up for the Broyles Award. And, we talk about the defense somewhat this year, But it's been a pretty magical season. Now I'm going to be able to turn into a Big Ten championship type of situation, which we, like you said, we touched on last episode. But yeah, now it's really here.
It's pretty incredible. The way that this season was going, I don't think I really expected to see Penn State in the Big Ten title game, just the way that Ohio State was trending, Oregon was trending, Indiana was trending. It was like, okay, there's just kind of a logjam up there at the top. And you still kind of expected Penn State to be able to make the college football playoff, and that is all but guaranteed at this point. And honestly, the way that the rankings and the brackets have been put out, like nothing is really guaranteed. Is like Georgia struggled mightily last night against Georgia Tech, and at the same time, there are plenty of other upsets around the country today. So it's like you really don't know until all this is said and done. And it's not that I'm scared that Penn State's going to miss the playoff, far from it. But this is just an outcome that I was like, I didn't see this coming a number of weeks ago. I think especially after that Ohio State loss, it shows you what Penn State did to get back to this point. So I want to stay with the defense because it was unbelievable to watch the way the defensive line especially got pressure in this game. And I think the thing that was really interesting to me is the way Maryland just consistently wasn't helping out their tackles. Like it took them a while to get into a situation where there'd be a tight end or a running back chipping to try and prevent Abdul Carter, Amin Vanover, deny Dennis Sutton from getting to MJ Morris. And at one point, the third string quarterback had to go in because Morris had a banged up hand. But it was one thing that was really interesting. And you and I covered this. I forget exactly when it happened in the past year. One of Maryland's tackles, right tackle, is Alan Herron, who, for those that may not remember, transferred to Penn State last year. Then he transferred to Maryland. He was a D3 recruit from Shorter University, 6'5", 310 pounds. So you and I had talked about him a little on the show. It's like, oh, recruiting big people, that always helps. Well, he was playing right tackle, and literally just Abdul just ran around him consistently, and they weren't helping him either. And it was just unbelievable. But it's that fascinating thing about talent evaluation that, yeah, Penn State probably had to be a little ticked off in the moment of like, man, like we wanted that big guy. And then you see it up against your best guy and you're kind of like, yeah, we're okay.
No, that definitely happens, right? You think you got a guy until you see the real guy show up. And I think that's always the thing when you're, again, skimming, plucking the hairs between player A and player B when it comes to the recruiting scene. Because it's like, yeah, is he good enough to play at this level, or is he going to be a difference maker like we speak about in the talent acquisition phase in terms of that program impacting type of guy, or just when you want to have those one-on-one matchups that you can call on that guy to win that matchup, because that's what essentially the game comes down to when you're not trying to overcoach corrections or mitigate risk too much, where it's like, no, we're trying to find matchups and attack um those weaknesses. And that's really when you're cooking with gas from the personnel standpoint.
In terms of lockdown, the defensive backs for Penn State, outstanding performance today. Interceptions by Davian Collins, as well as Day Lane there late in the game. He was a guy who got some opportunities earlier on in the year. Tony Rojas, the linebacker, got himself an interception. Everybody really had a chance to eat in this game, which was great. And then on the defensive side as a whole, you held Maryland to 15 of 26 passing for 122 yards. The touchdown, as I mentioned there early in the game, 58% completion percentage. You held Maryland to 72 yards rushing, 2.3 yards per carry. Roman Hemby, who we talked briefly about coming into the game, 13 carries for 64 yards, a long of 19. He averaged 4.9, but Maryland really had to abandon the game, the running game, that is. Ty Felton, 4 catches, 27 yards on 4 targets, never really got going. So that is a huge credit, because that was something we talked about coming into this game, is that Felton consistently gets a lot of targets, gets a lot of love, and Penn State just took away his strength. And that's literally the only thing you can ask for from a defense. So extremely impressive outing by the defense. And if anything, that was overshadowed a little bit by Tyler Warren, who set 3 different records during this game. I want to pull up all these individual records because there are several of them. Tyler Warren captured the record for the most career receptions by a Penn State tight end with 130. Tyler Warren also claimed the all-time touchdown record for tight ends at Penn State, passing the great Pat Fryermuth. now has 17 touchdowns. And there was another one here. Oh, yeah. Tyler Warren becomes the all-time catch leader for tight ends in Big Ten history. He did that in the first quarter. I've seen a lot of discussion out there, Justin, about who's the best tight end in America, and Colson Loveland for Michigan got a lot of love, no pun intended, earlier on today, and people were talking about how good he is. And then Penn State fans got to see Harold Fannin Jr. for Bowling Green earlier on this season. You and I think the world of him. How is there a competition for this?
There shouldn't be. I mean, it shouldn't really be up for debate. I sometimes I don't know. I don't think he's lost in the sauce in the sense of like just the overall scheme of college football, because if we just see him on a week to week basis, but I don't think it's close when it comes to the best tight end in the country. Just the versatility that he brings, the type of plays that he makes. Even from a draft perspective, it's not like he's a good college tight end, right? No, he's like a transferable prototypical tight end that's going to get drafted high in the NFL, that he's producing in college, shows all the athletic traits that you're looking for, and he's a special player. Like, there's no other way to put it. So, like, I think that'll come out by the time the award shows come.
I do sincerely hope he gets the invite to at least be in New York for the Heisman Trophy presentation, the ceremony. I don't think he's going to win it, and that's okay. I wasn't really caring all that much if he did or did not win it. It's about the team success. But Tyler Warren, 6 for 68, 1 touchdown, at all receiving, by the way, on 9 targets. Then he ran the ball, 3 times for 32 yards, and he had a completion for 9 yards. So it's just a little bit of everything. And there was this one play, I think it was in the first half, where Drew Allard was kind of scrambling for his life, and they couldn't tell if it was a forward pass or a lateral. I think they counted it as a rush. And Tyler Warren takes off for 29 yards, leaps over somebody, tightrope job down the sidelines. Like, it's just freakish athleticism for a guy his size. And the assembly line of tight ends continues to come out of Penn State. You're still sitting there wanting for the Penn State wide receivers to do something. And they had their opportunities to get involved in this game. Drew Allard ultimately finished 17 of 26 for 171 yards, a touchdown through the air. That one went to the aforementioned Tyler Warren. 65% completion percentage. Bo Beulah, 2 for 3, 13, had a touchdown himself. He got that one to Tysier Denmark on literally the last play of the game. What did you think about Penn State continuing to try and score there all the way up until the final whistle and ultimately making this 44-7?
I think having a Bo in there getting critical reps is something that you need to do. Make sure that you stay sharp. Make sure that everybody's getting quality reps when they get into the game. So I think anytime that happens, I mean, this isn't recreational football. You've got another game to play, and the guys that are getting those reps at the end of the game, like, they're auditioning for another position, and they're sharpening up to be ready to play in the Big Ten championship. So I think it's needed. It's a requirement for a high-powered football program to operate that way.
I agree with that. I don't think Maryland is going to love it necessarily. It's just another knife in between the ribs in this rivalry. Penn State's won in 44 out of 48 meetings all time. So, it's a little dig.
No. It's one of those funny rivalries, right? Like, it's just familiar.
The word rivalry is just incorrect. I think we need to come up with another word.
No, that's true. That's true.
But this was just such an impressive game from the defense, and I thought Penn State ran the ball exceptionally well. Nick Singleton, 13 carries for 87 yards and 2 touchdowns. Nick had his burst about him today. What did you see from Nick?
No, I'm happy you said that. He did have a nice burst to him. I mean, again, nothing changing to his actual traits, right? Like, when he has some space, he's able to get that engine going and be able to make you hold your breath a little bit for a big play to come about. And I think that, I mean, like you said, 13 for 87, K-Tron 13 for 34, even though it was impactful, 13 for 34. But they seem to make those spot plays when they need to have them, right? We just talked about that rhythmic offense, moving the chains and not having any negative plays. And I think they did that throughout the whole day.
Also, the 66-yard kickoff return to there early in the first quarter, I believe. That was outstanding there from Nick Singleton. Seeing him getting involved in the kick return game, it's not exactly Saquon-esque, but it is that similar burst like in space that he can kill you. That was outstanding from Nick Singleton. Nick Singleton also getting involved in the passing game, 3 catches for 17 yards. Katron Allen, 13 for 34. Didn't have as much room to do anything. Credit to Maryland. They did try to clog up the middle a good amount. Tyler Warren had more success in that department. I think it's a little bit more bully ball, but once you could see Katron Allen trying to get in there and work between the tackles, he just didn't have the space to do it, and that's where Nick Singleton took advantage on the outside, and that's the beauty of this rushing attack. Corey Smith getting his opportunities there in the third and fourth quarter continues to show that flash, man. Like, I'm excited to see what happens in the future when he builds his body to really handle the Big Ten workload. What did you see?
Coming in and make it like, having that nice little splash for 12 yards, that always gives you that burst that you want to see out of your running back, somebody that can create, and that's a 0 to 5 runner. He's shown to be able to do that, right? You talk about his stature. I don't know if he gets much bigger from a height standpoint, but even from that, I think he's a good changeup, and being able to run between the tackles at his size and having that burst is very, very attractive in this day and age, right? We talk about just getting in space, being able to get him on edges and things of that nature, and that's a nice piece for Penn State moving forward.
Bo Prabula did Bo Prabula things, 6 carries for 29 yards and a touchdown. Both Aller and Prabula had a passing touchdown and a rushing touchdown in this game. I mean, this was outstanding all around for Penn State, offensive and defensively. You saw Khalil Dinkins get dinged up. You saw Vega Ioane get banged up and come out of the game, come back into the game. So that was good. The Ioane one made you hold your breath a little bit more, considering what we've talked about this past week, the injury to Anthony Donko at right tackle. Nolan Rucci played well. JB Nelson rotating in there. Cooper Cousins rotating in there. Penn State getting their depth, plenty of opportunities. And I think this was timely for that. And speaking of some of that depth at wide receivers, I mentioned, nothing really to write home about. It was nice to see Tysier Denmark get himself a touchdown there to close out the game. You and I think the world of him. He was involved in punt return duties. 1 catch for Liam Clifford for 5 yards. Julian Fleming, 1 catch for 5 yards. No receptions for Harrison Wallace in this game. You've got 4 catches for 49 yards for Omari Evans. So that was really nice to see him get a little bit extra during this game. Julian Fleming was somebody who we learned was dinged up in practice and was not able to really get involved in the last outing for Penn State. So you can understand the injury issues for Fleming. But I personally have been excited to see Evans get a little bit more run within this offense. And it's been like this. You and I have talked about it since the summer, is that there's this open competition. And it's just a matter of who's going to step up and take reps. And it seems like Evans is doing that.
And you're right. And it seems like he's always making a big play. Like, it seems like whenever he's catching the ball, it's never a routine hitch or slant or something of that nature. It's
always something big.
It's definitely an explosive. So yeah, you would like to see him get some more run if he's going to continue to have that ratio of catches to explosives. But we've always kind of identified him as a guy to be that one-touch guy. So it's good to see him working in there, especially this late in the season and when the team needs to get hot, playoffs, Big Ten championship. Make some plays, baby.
Harrison Wallace was dinged up coming into this game. He did not participate in warmups extensively. He was listed as questionable coming into the game. So Penn State just being cautious in this one. That's a positive. The one thing that I was thinking about during this game, as it became obvious that Penn State was going to win, you have the upset Michigan taking out Ohio State in Columbus, and we'll get into that a little bit more. But my biggest thing was, it's that double-edged sword, and I know Lane Kiffin caught some flack for this. Like, oh, do you want to play in your conference championship game? You have another game, or do you want to sit tight and get ready for the playoff and maybe get a better draw, something like that? For me, it wasn't so much thinking about the seeding. For me, it was more, this is a team that has sustained a fair amount of injuries, and you've seen a good amount of guys come in and out of the lineup. It's late November. That sort of stuff happens. So there's part of my brain that was like, man, had Ohio State won the game and Penn State took care of business against Maryland, now you got a nice runway to get yourself healthy and ready for a playoff game that would go down on December 21st. Now you got to turn around and get ready for the Oregon Ducks on December 7th in Indianapolis. So it's still like, okay, you're still on the hamster wheel. But how did you feel about the team's overall health coming into this? And are you concerned about that going into another game and then the playoff?
Not necessarily concerned about their health. They did look to play with a nice pep in their step, I would say. I don't know if they got word of the Ohio State games, like, hey, we win this and finish out going to the championship.
It
Seemed
seemed
like
like
they were
just
sharp
as
and
they were
on
taking
point.
the field, yeah.
Yeah, they seemed like they were sharp and on point, and which you would like to see. Um, the type of football being played this late in the season. So I was pleased with everything all around.
Defense just played angry. I don't know what it was. I was loving it. I don't know. Maybe it was just
Opportunistic defense, man. Opportunistic defense, and they were flying around. So when you see that, have these type of results.
so now we'll touch on it briefly here. Michigan takes out Ohio State, and it's just a wild scene in Columbus. And that, first of all, the game was just a rock fight for the most part. 13-10. Michigan somehow withstands it. You had to miss field goals. You had tons of turnovers, great defensive performances, great defensive red zone stands. I mean, you had everything that you could ask for. And somehow Michigan pulls this thing out. So now it raises these enormous questions about Ohio State and the future of Ryan Day. The post-game situation is madness on the field at the Horseshoe. You have Michigan players trying to plant the Michigan flag inside the Ohio State O at the 50-yard line. That turns into a fight. Players are being maced by police on the field. And all these things are shaking out in this, as they were calling it on the Fox broadcast, like, oh, this is such a beautiful rivalry, and this has turned really ugly. And it's like, it's a pretty ugly rivalry. Like, it's a great rivalry. It's fun to watch, but it's like these teams still freaking hate each other. And it was so weird, Justin, coming into this game, is that it did feel like a bit of a foregone conclusion, the way that Michigan has struggled so mightily this year. And Ohio State just seemed like they had all the firepower in the world, but it was a matchup disadvantage for Ohio State again. And for some reason, the play calling didn't make a ton of sense. They kept running right into the strengths of what Michigan could do, both offensively and defensively. I don't know how much you got to see of the game, but are you surprised by this outcome?
Never really surprised in a rivalry game. I mean, Michigan, Ohio State, we talk like a true rivalry game, right? Where they kind of get more up for that game than they might a playoff or a bowl game. But I'm not surprised, like you said, in the matchup and how Ohio State and Michigan has built their teams. Michigan still has that physical dominance a little bit there. I mean, when we talk about the outside and skilled players from Ohio State standpoint, I think they've always had the advantage on that side. But to be able to slow them down and the type of defense that they were able to play, they came up and made plays when they needed to make them, and they were able to overcome some things. So I'm not surprised, but it's a pretty wild thing when that's what I was mentioning last week when I said, hey, we might have to go to the championship game. And it was like, does Ohio State, I mean, are they going to lose to Michigan? It's like, you never really know. And they didn't play scared, and they're up for it. And now here we are.
Here we are. Honestly, did you think that after the Ohio State loss that Penn State would wind up in the Big Ten title game?
I thought there was a real chance. I thought there was just a lot of parity amongst a lot of matchups across the country, and the way that teams have been looking, I didn't think Ohio State was unbeatable by any stretch of the imagination, and felt like they could lose to Michigan when you just watch the teams across the board, regardless of how Michigan has what the record is. Like they're a well-coached team. They have the requisite personnel, size, and all those things. And when you can match up, and sometimes you play mind tricks on coaches, right? You see some of those things that happen later in that game, and you just kind of scratch your head. You call a game a little different depending on who you're playing. So, yeah, I think Michigan has the one up on them at this moment.
So you can't get ahead of yourself in terms of really thinking about the playoff, but we will take a second here to kind of back out and look at the greater picture of college football. So at the time we're recording this, Oregon is going to be kicking off against Washington in Eugene, Oregon, very shortly. Oregon already weeks ago clinched their spot in the Big Ten title game. So no matter what happens in that game, they're going to Indianapolis. How do you feel about facing the Oregon Ducks? Because in my opinion, they're the most complete team in the country.
I mean, they are. But again, you keep it close in the way that Penn State does play when they play well. I think they can play with anybody when they play well. I think Oregon's one of the most explosive teams, and like they play solid defense, play with a level of physicality that's admirable. But I think Penn State can play with them, but I think there's going to be again a real dogfight with a more explosive team than even that Ohio State team that we played against earlier this year.
In terms of the top 5, there will obviously be movement now. Ohio State's loss, as I mentioned, Oregon has yet to play at the time that we're recording this. So if they were to go down to Washington, could you see a shuffling? Perhaps. Notre Dame is seconds away from beating USC. USC getting a late touchdown, about 13 seconds left at the time we're recording this, but it's 49-34 as I'm looking at it now. Texas is yet to kick off against Texas A&M. That is in College Station. Kyle Field is going to be a madhouse tonight, as we saw on College Game Day earlier on. So number 3, Texas, by no means out of the woods. There's a lot that can happen, but there's a real world possibility Penn State could find themselves in a first round bye.
100%. I mean, again, keep winning.
I never would have guessed this, Justin. Like coming into this season, the way this whole freaking season is gone, I'm like, no. Like I just you see the good and the bad, and you're like, I didn't see it.
The good has to outweigh the bad when you win. I think the winning has had a premium this year that has never had in college football before, and winning is also harder to come by, as you can see across the country in just terms of like, you don't know exactly who's going to win based on a brand or not. And so now the fact that you can get through the season with one loss, sit in a pretty powerful position in one of in the best conferences in the country. So it's going to be interesting to see how this thing plays out.
It's been a fun season. For as angry as I know I was after the Minnesota game and how positive this game felt today, doing what you're supposed to do in dominant fashion, winning going away, winning in all 3 phases. Yes, it's inferior competition. I feel bad for Maryland and Mike Locksley because they do have their successes recruiting. There is talent on that team. They just have yet to put it together. I think Locksley is an outstanding coach, but they just haven't really found the groove yet, so to speak. But man, you and I talked about in the offseason is that this was a show me season for Penn State football because there was so much hype going into last season. Penn State's making the 4-team playoff. Penn State could win the national championship. And I think you and I, the whole offseason, were like, we'll see. We'll see what happens. And somehow the chips fell the way they did. And it just felt like the last few weeks, Justin, it's been just absolute chaos, especially with this 12-team playoff. It's made the games later in the season more meaningful, deeper into the top 25. And I think that's a good thing for college football.
Yes, I would agree. And again, when you talk about the transfer portal and the acquisitions of players through money, I think that's created a little bit more parity than people would probably expect as well. I mean, just you don't know exactly what SMU is going to give you, right? You don't know what Oregon's going to bring you. And yeah, it's a week-to-week basis. Win, keep it moving. Win and keep it moving.
That's all it is. Let's see how this goes in Indianapolis. So now on Saturday, December 7th in Indianapolis, Penn State will face the number 1 Oregon Ducks at 8 p.m. Eastern on CBS in the Big Ten championship game. Not even thinking about the playoff at this point. To say anything is guaranteed. The way that they do these rankings, man, like it's so clear that they're moving the goalposts just to be like, well, it'd be great if we got the Alabama brand or the Ohio State brands. It'd be good if we got them in there. And it's like you can make the argument for, well, the strength of schedule, this loss, well, this time of year, and it was cloudy out or whatever. It's like you're trying to put the most profitable field together. Let's not kid ourselves. That's the thing that's driving me nuts about this. I know you love the business side of this thing.
No, it's an interesting thing, and I think expanding the playoffs, they're getting exactly what they asked for.
Mm-hmm. It's chaos. It's madness. Thank you all so much for tuning into State of State. We cannot wait because this Wednesday we'll have a full preview episode, Penn State versus Oregon for the Big Ten championship. Thank you all so much for joining us. This episode and our entire library of shows is available now on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever else you get your podcasts. Please like, comment, subscribe, rate us, and turn on notifications. Follow us on social media at State of State Pod. Comment on our YouTube channel. And if you haven't done so already, you can become a member of our YouTube channel. For just 99 cents a month, you can get all upcoming episodes of State of State, plus our entire members-only playlist, ad-free, commercial-free. Hit the join button on our homepage or follow the link in the description of this podcast. State of State is presented by Bet Online and by Blue White Outfitters.